February 1997. Millions of Americans are tuned in to Coast AM, a late-night radio program dedicated to the strange and unexplained. A man identifying himself as Mel Waters calls in with a highly specific, bizarre story. He claims to own a piece of property on Mel'S Ridge, located roughly 9 miles west of Ellensburg, Washington. This diagram shows a cross-section of the Earth's crust to scale. According to Mel, he discovered a 9-foot-wide circular pit on his land. To test its depth, he tied heavy weights to fishing line and lowered it down. He claimed to have unspooled 80,000 feet, more than 15 miles of line, straight down into the mantle, without ever hitting a bottom. He also threw heavy debris, including old refrigerators and televisions, down the shaft. He never heard a sound of impact. No crash, no echo. The acoustic physics of a normal subterranean cavity require sound waves to reflect off solid walls, creating a reverberation time known as RT60. Here, the sound simply vanished. A bottomless pit that swallows matter and sound defies basic physics. This physical impossibility provided a perfect, empty vessel for a late-night audience already primed for the paranormal. State geologists immediately pointed out the reality of subterranean pressures. The Earth's crust is extremely hot and dense. A hollow shaft descending 15 miles would collapse under the weight of the surrounding strata. For comparison, the Soviet Union spent 2 decades drilling the Kola super-deep borehole, an actual scientific drilling project in northwestern Russia. Using advanced industrial equipment, they managed to reach a depth of 7.5 miles before the heat made the rock act like plastic, halting progress. The Mel'S Ridge area does have a history of mining. Geologists suggested that Mel's story was likely inspired by an ordinary but deep, abandoned local mine shaft that had been boarded up or forgotten. But the wall of scientific reality didn't kill the legend. Instead, the story adapted, incorporating elements of biological horror. The claims escalated from depth measurements to biological anomalies. Rumors began circulating on the radio that a local hunter had thrown his deceased dog into the pit, only to see the exact same dog walking out of the nearby woods alive the very next day. By 2002, Mel claimed to have found a second similar aperture in Nevada near a Basque settlement. There, he said, he and some locals conducted an experiment, lowering a live sheep in a crate 1,500 feet into the earth. When they pulled the crate back to the surface, the sheep was dead. Mel described the animal as being cooked from the inside out. When they cut it open, they found its internal organs had been replaced by a massive pulsing tumor. Inside that tumor was an 18-inch creature. Mel described it as looking like a fetal seal, but with human eyes. He claims this entity detached from an umbilical cord, locked eyes with the experimenters, and communicated with them telepathically before diving back down the shaft. The introduction of this entity transformed the whole. It had evolved from a silent geological feature into a sentient, terrifying source of resurrection and mutation. As these claims of resurrection and alien biology broadcasted nationwide, Mel's account took a paranoid turn. He reported that armed military personnel had suddenly occupied his property, blocking his access and claiming a plane had crashed. He described unidentified agents arriving in full yellow hazmat suits, cordoning off the abyss, and threatening him with regulatory fines if he didn't cooperate. Listeners then noticed that satellite imagery of the Mel'S Ridge area appeared to be blacked out or censored on early mapping software. Mel claimed the government seized his land, forced him to accept a lease of $250,000 a month, and relocated him to Australia to keep him quiet. Investigative reporters traveled to Kittitas County to find the truth. They scoured tax documents, property deeds, and voting registries. They found absolutely no public records indicating that anyone named Mel Waters had ever lived in or owned property in the county. In modern conspiracy culture, an absence of evidence acts as a powerful catalyst. To believers, the fact that Mel Waters couldn't be found wasn't proof that he was a hoax. It was proof that federal authorities had executed a total erasure of an American citizen's identity. Decades after those initial radio broadcasts, the story continues to circulate. Modern forums and video essays have stripped away the 1990s analog radio context. updating the legend to include discussions of space-time distortions and quantum anomalies. Online researchers cross-reference the physical dimensions of Powell with declassified Department of Energy documents. They point to Project Gnome, a 1961 underground nuclear test in New Mexico, suggesting that the Washington pit was actually a classified testing cavity from the Cold War. The story survives because it acts as an open-source template. Every new generation of listeners can take the blank slate of a bottomless pit and project their own specific technological and existential anxieties straight down into the dark. What began as a local late-night call about an acoustic anomaly, likely an old mining shaft, spiraled outward. It grew to encompass telepathic fetal seals, forced international exiles, and massive federal cover-ups. As a piece of folklore, it is highly effective. The legend provides a tangible, physical location to house deeply modern fears, the dread of absolute powerlessness, and the anxiety that an individual's identity can be completely erased by the state. Ultimately, the whole functions as a psychological mirror. The true horror isn't the abyss itself, but the ease with which a localized hoax can scale into a national obsession, proving that in the absence of institutional trust, folklore will always rise to fill the void.